Hey, beautiful people, I'm out running some errands. Had to stop and get my, there it is, Starbucks fix for the day. Yes, I have joined the Starbucks cult. If you ever order for me, it's a venti iced coffee, extra ice, milk, and two Splendas. I'm not choosy about the milk. 2% is fine. A little half and half once in a while when I'm celebrating. It's all good. Listen, here's what I want to talk about. I've got several things I need to answer. People who have inboxed me, emailed me about certain things, and it's just easier to talk about it all here. If you watch this video and say, "Oh, he's talking about me," yeah, I probably am. And if you know my heart at all, you're not going to be offended at what I'm about to say because I'm not singling anybody out. I'm not telling your name. But here's a couple of things. People have asked me to say stuff about what's her name, Kim Davis from Kentucky. I got nothing to say about her. I think you probably know what I think about it. I said a little something about it Sunday, especially when people compare her to Rosa Parks. I find that a little over the top because civil disobedience was always historically for the inclusion of people, not for the exclusion of people. But, I love the Pope and I love all of his trip this week, but he said a little something that kind of propped her up. At least the conservatives who are backing her read that into it. So it doesn't make me discount the Pope. It makes me say, well, it is what it is. One thing's for sure, it's not going to stop marriage equality. So, she's got her 15 minutes of fame. So that's all I'm going to say about it. I don't want my page to be about all of that. Once in a while, I'll talk about LGBT issues, and I put that on my Just As I Am blog. But generally, I'm a happily married out man who is successful and prosperous and anointed, and I don't need to keep making all those same points over and over again. History's on the side of people like me, and it is what it is, so let her do her thing and get her book deal, and that's all I'm going to say about that. And those of you who are gay who want me to be more of an activist, it's just not what I do. If I feel very strongly about something, I'll say something about it, but otherwise, I'm just not gonna go there. So that's all I'm gonna say about that. When it comes to scriptures that I use, and someone asked me about a couple of nights ago, I just felt impressed to post this little thing about believing that things are going to work out. In a way, I was kind of saying it to myself about something that I was concerned about that evening, and sure enough, that did work out. And as is always the case, immediately everybody was on there saying, "Oh, that's exactly for me. It's just for me." I think it's been shared about 50 times. And it's because those are universal things about believing that things are going to work out. I'm sure if you're watching this video way down the line from when I'm recording it, you won't know what I'm talking about. But those of you who are watching it today, and today is, we're getting close to the end of September. So anyway, I used the passage of Scripture, Isaiah 30, verse 15, where he says, "In quietness and in confidence shall be your strength." Someone brought it to my attention that that's not what that verse of Scripture is about, and it's a fair statement because I'm such a stickler for context. Those of you that hear my voice know that I'm always talking about when you read a Scripture, read it in context. That being said, there is a nuanced difference between taking poetic license and taking something out of context. I'll give you a few examples. First of all, every time Jesus quoted the Old Testament, if he quoted the law or the prophets, go back and look at what Moses or David or Isaiah was saying. And I mean, every time what Jesus said they were saying is not what they were saying. I'll give you a case in point. If I said Proverbs, I think it's 6:6 says, "You're snared by the words of your mouth. You're taken by the words of your mouth." Well, that's true. We are, sometimes snared by our own words. If, however, you go back and read that chapter in context, what he's saying there is don't be surety for a friend or don't co-sign with someone. And he says if you do co-sign with them, you're snared with the words of your mouth. Is it taking it out of context? Yes. Is it true on its own? Yes. Just like when people quote Proverbs, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he." Well, that is a true concept. Go back and read the context. That's not what he's talking about there. He's talking about when you're sitting at a table with someone who's wealthy, don't kiss up to them because of their wealth, because as he thinks in his heart, so is he. Uh, do people quote that out of context? Yeah, the classic, is it James Allen that wrote the classic "As a Man Thinketh"? It's taken from that Proverbs, and it's still true. Classic one is Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you. People quote it all the time. Nearly everybody I've ever talked to says that's my verse. Well, you go back and read the context. He's prophesying to them that they're about to go into slavery for the next 70 years. But he says, but I know the plans I have for you. Is it taking that verse out of context? Yes, I've taught on that before. Is the truth that God knows the plans he has for you, is that a universal truth? Yes. A New Testament example is Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. When you go back and read the context, what Paul is saying is, I've been poor and I've been rich. I can deal with whatever. I can handle it through Christ who strengthens me. Is it appropriate for people to quote that scripture and feel like they have extra strength through Christ? Yes. That doesn't do any damage to the integrity of the truth. It's only when people take the scriptures out of context to say something that's not in keeping with the character of God. That's when I take issue with it. But other than that, I know what Isaiah chapter 30 is about. I took the book of Isaiah in Bible college, and I dropped it and take it a second time. So I'm very familiar with it. But if I say to everybody, stop worrying about your stuff tonight, in quietness and in confidence shall be your strength, Isaiah himself would say that's okay to use it that way. And while I'm on the subject, let me say something also about that. And I'm not singling anybody out, and God knows I don't want somebody to single me out on their Facebook page and start targeting me. I've had enough drama in my life. I don't want to have drama with anybody. When I have people who write me and say things like, why don't you say stuff about Black Lives Matter or this and that, I feel like I've spent my entire life working for racial reconciliation. If people don't know my life's work, then there's no point in me just saying some sound bites on my Facebook page and getting people riled up. If that's what you want to put on your page, fine, it's your page. I would never be arrogant enough to tell you what you should or shouldn't put on your page. But by the same token, don't tell me what I should or shouldn't put on mine. Don't assume that just because I'm not talking about white cops killing black kids and not being prosecuted for it, don't assume that I'm not horrified by that. Don't assume that just because I'm not talking about what's happening in the world right now that I'm not aware of it. I am a news junkie. Yesterday, I watched all of Obama's speech to the CNN. I watched all of Putin's speech to the UN. I got up this morning first thing and was watching Morning Joe and then talking about it. I watched the news constantly. I watched the news so much that MSNBC was burned into my screen and I had to get a new TV. Just because I'm not talking about it doesn't mean I'm not aware of it. Let me tell you something about the way I was raised. And this is no reflection on my parents or my grandparents, but I was raised in a apocalyptic, end of the world, paranoid ideology that we believed it was the end of the world at any time. When I was a kid, prophecy preachers would come to our church, and I remember them saying that Jesus was coming back. The rapture of the church was going to take place in 1988. I remember as a child sitting there and counting it up and never assuming that I would live past the age of 30. That's one reason I didn't come out my whole life, because I thought we were here on borrowed time. Someone who I loved and respected and admired, someone who was related to me, came to our church and preached that the communists were going to take over in 1972. I was a very intense kid, and I listened to those things. And every night before I would go to sleep, I would look out my window and I'd pray that the communists weren't coming in to take over. Another prophecy preacher came and he said that, I remember I was sitting on the front row of the Bremen Church of God, and I won't say his name because he may still be alive, but the evangelist said, when the communists come, they're going to take that little boy's daddy out and cut his head off because he's a preacher of the gospel. Well, that horrified me to think that they were going to decapitate my father. So I grew up hearing that. The same man that said the communists were going to destroy us in 1972, Also preached that in 1981 the comet Kahutek was going to come in and destroy the Earth, and then God knows we had all kind of the year 2000 and Y2K, and I've heard about it. I grew up with the threat of nuclear war. Some of you who are a little bit older than me used to do those drills where you get out of your seats and do prepare for the bomb. Just because I don't talk about it doesn't mean I'm not aware of it, but I cannot live in fear. I just can't do it. Don't tell me what John Hagee said. I don't care what he said. He's got his audience. I know to people who are pure in heart, who believe in the rapture, for you it's the blessed hope. The side of it that you don't know about is the rapture is a racket. People make money off of it. They keep them hyped up in fear. I can't do it. I came from that. Let me tell you this. If today's the end of the world, then so be it. There's nothing more I can do than say I'm doing all I can to shine a light in the darkness. Just because I put stuff on my page that's positive or whatever doesn't mean that I'm clueless. If you write things about enlightened people who are unaware, then I hope you're not putting me in that category, because I'm clearly not unaware, but I cannot live in that. I went through the whole charismatic movement of intercessors groups who were just always heavy and heavily burdened, and it was the end of the world. And we walked around places 7 times and prayed. I can't do it anymore. I can't live in fear. I can't live in paranoia. If you think that's hiding my head in the sand, then I don't know what to tell you. I think that shows perhaps your level of discernment. But if you want to talk about it, more power to you. I'm not telling. Look, I got 5,000 friends on my one main page alone. I got people who are all over the map, politically and theologically, whatever. Sometimes I see people post, people that grew up in my church, I see them post things that I'm horrified by. I think, my God, how could you possibly believe that and be my friend? Or clearly I had no influence on you for over the years. But I think, well, you know what? It's your business. You're a grown man. You're a grown woman. If that's what you want to post, if that's if that's your viewpoint, then fine. Namaste. Go with God. But I'm not going to do it on my page. When people want to, tell me verses of scripture about what they think gay people are or aren't. I've already written a book about it. I'm not going to match wits with you. I'm not going to argue with you. There's nothing more I can say about it. I mean, I could say all kind of things. Like somebody wrote me the other day and said, God can never bless gay marriage or same-sex marriage because marriage is for procreation. And I started to write that person back and say, okay, if you're going to make that point, you better not be using birth control. And after you go through menopause, you better go get a divorce, because if that's all that sex is for, if it's only for procreation, then clearly people who are barren or sterile, they shouldn't get married. But what's the point? There's no point in saying that to somebody. The people who take the Bible literally and want to hammer me and clobber me with literal scriptures, I could say, really, if you're going to do that, then you better cut your hand off if it offends you or pluck your eye out. I've said all these things. I don't want to go there with you. If that's what you want to put on your page, God bless you. I don't think you're evil. I don't think you're bad. I'm not mocking you. That's just not what I do. But I can only ask you, don't judge me. Don't assume that because I'm not talking about political things that I'm not politically engaged, because I certainly am, and I do have opinions. I'm probably more liberal than a lot of my audience would like, and yet I watched every bit of the Republican debates the other night. I thought many of them made really good points. I do think, if you really believe in small government, which I get the whole point of small government, I understand it. I understand free enterprise and competition. I also know that it's hard to tell somebody to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps when they don't have a boot. But that being said, I think, all right, if you're going to believe in small government, that's fine. Then get out of women's uteruses and get out of people's bedrooms. If you really are a libertarian or a conservative, then you should be more live and let live. But I am very politically engaged, and I know it sounds like I'm all over the map talking about, but I mean, I hear from people constantly who want me to talk about these things. And if I were to sit down and write you out an answer, it would be like writing a term paper over and over again. So bottom line is this: I love you all. If I have not blocked you on Facebook, that means I'm cool with you, even if I don't agree with you on everything that you say, even if I don't interpret the scriptures the way that you interpret them. The only reason I block you is if you just wear me out with personal attacks. I've got close to 1,000 people blocked. I will put you on that list if that's. But if you just want to have the conversation, that's fine. But I don't want to argue with you. Do I think it's the end of the world? No. I grew up with the end of the world concept, and I can't go there. If you want to tell me to pray, then yeah, all right. God help us. God have mercy on us all. I can't pray any more than that. If you're going to judge me for being positive or seeing the glass half full, then that's on you. I'm not going to make any apology for that. I have been through a lot, especially the last 5 years. I've worked diligently to get to this place in my life where I really have serenity, and I'm very protective over my serenity. So namaste, go with God, post whatever you want to post. Don't take me to task if I take something you think is out of context. I don't want to play Bible wars with you and say rebuke not an elder, but I have been doing this for a very long time. I don't need you to tell me what the scriptures say, because I know that. And if I just want to encourage people to be at peace, that doesn't mean that I'm clueless about the suffering that's in the world. I hear from people who are suffering nearly 24 hours a day, and I have pretty much for the last 43 years of ministry. So I'm not clueless. I'm not unaware. I'm not living in la la land. I make no apology for being positive. I make no apology for believing it's the best time to be alive. That's the way I choose to see the world. I hope that you can respect that, because I respect how you choose to see your world. I hope that makes sense. You don't need to answer me if you think this is about you, because I'm actually answering about 7 different people on the things that I've said right now. I love you. I hope you have an excellent day. I got to drink the rest of my coffee. Bye.